Everyone says their story is real on Reddit. You've seen it 100 times. Not a writer, sorry for formatting, this really happened. Half the time you roll your eyes, screenshot for your friend, and move on. But every now and then you hit a post that feels off. Too detailed to be casual fiction. Too mundane to be creepypasta. And then, in the very last few lines, there's this one small detail that makes it very, very hard to laugh it off. Tonight, I want you to listen to 3 of those. Each one started as a throwaway account, buried in a late-night thread. Each one sounded fake, even to Reddit. But it's the final detail that keeps people up at night. The first story came from a user who called himself Throwaway Night Shift. He said he worked security for a small medical office building just outside his college town. 4 floors, a pharmacy on the ground level, doctor's offices above, and a sleep clinic on the top floor. Nothing fancy, just a square, beige building where fluorescent lights hummed a little too loud after midnight. He was 19, broke, and happy to get paid to sit in a swivel chair and stare at monitors. His job was simple: watch the cameras, buzz in any cleaning staff after hours, and walk one patrol around the building every 2 hours to make sure nobody had propped a door open. The system was basic. Every employee had a badge. Badges logged every entry and exit, time, door, floor. On his desk were 6 monitors, each split into tiny boxes of security feeds, stairwells, lobbies, parking lot, the backloading dock. Most nights, nothing happened. He did homework, drank too much coffee, and tried not to fall asleep. The only person he ever really saw after midnight was Maya. She worked in billing on the 2nd floor and was, in his words, the kind of tired that lives in your shoulders. She always stayed late, always left in the early hours, always wore the same gray cardigan no matter the season. Twice a week, sometime between 1 and 3 in the morning, she'd appear on camera too, walking down the back hallway toward the exit that faced the tiny employee smoking area. There was no audio, but he could tell when she was laughing at something on her phone. Sometimes she'd look up at the camera and give a little salute, like, "You still awake up there?" He started saluting back at the monitor, even though she couldn't see him. It became routine, boring, harmless. One Friday, around 11, she stopped by the front desk on her way upstairs. "You're the night kid, right?" she asked, signing in. He nodded. "Yeah, you're the only one who makes this job less dead." She laughed, and he noticed how tired her eyes really were. "I'm going to take that as a compliment. I'll wave at you later." He did see her on camera too that night, at exactly 2:13 a.m., cardigan and all, heading out for a smoke. The next day, she died. Not in the building. Not on some cursed staircase. She left at 5 in the evening like everyone else, drove home, and a drunk driver blew a red light and hit her on the driver's side. It was on the local news. Her photo, the gray cardigan, the whole thing. He found out when he came in Sunday night and saw a little framed picture of her at the front desk with a tea light candle in front of it. The day guard, packing up to leave, told him, "Terrible, isn't it? HR's going to send an email." He spent the first few hours of his shift feeling weirdly hollow. He hadn't known her. Not really. But he realized she was the only proof he had that time was moving. That each night wasn't just the same stale coffee and dead air. At 2:13 a.m., he glanced at camera 2 out of habit. Maya walked calmly down the back hallway toward the exit, gray cardigan wrapped tight, phone in one hand. He stared at the monitor, his coffee halfway to his mouth, fingers frozen. The timestamp at the top of the image read the exact current date and time. Sunday, 2:13 a.m. He told himself it was old footage, maybe something looping from the DVR. Maybe the system had glitched and was replaying Friday night. He switched to camera 4, the live feed of the front lobby, where he could see himself in the corner. There he was, sitting at the desk, coffee halfway to his mouth, on a slight delay. Live. He flipped back to camera 2. Maya was at the door now, hand on the bar, turning her head as if listening to someone just out of frame. Then she pushed it open and stepped out into the smoking area. The door shut. The hallway was empty. He didn't do a patrol that hour. He stayed glued to the monitors until his shift ended, then spent half an hour in the empty parking lot, telling himself he'd just been tired, that security cameras glitched all the time. Monday afternoon, HR sent the email. Grief counselors would be available. Maya's badge had been deactivated that morning. He went in for his next shift determined not to look at camera 2. By 2:10 a.m., his eyes were burning from not blinking. At 2:12, The fluorescent lights above his desk flickered once, then steadied. His mouse hovered over a spreadsheet on the computer screen. At 2:13, he clicked over to camera 2. Same hallway. Same gray cardigan. Same slow walk to the exit. This time he watched the timestamp tick. The seconds moved normally. 2:13:12. 2:13:13. 2:13:14. Maya's movements were exactly the same as the night before. The tilt of her head. The way her right shoulder twitched like she had a knot there. The little hitch in her step where the floor had a slight rise. He told himself, again, that it was a loop. Pre-recorded footage. But badge access wasn't pre-recorded. He opened the log window. The building's system showed every badge scan on every door in real time. Doctors, janitors, pharmacists. He scrolled to the bottom. At 5:58 p.m., hours before his shift, someone had swiped Maya's badge at the rear entrance to come into the building. At 2:17 a.m., for minutes after the camera showed her pushing through the smoking area door, her badge pinged again. Exit. The little icon next to her name glowed green. Active. HR had deactivated it, he told himself. They had to have deactivated it. Maybe the system hadn't updated on his side. The next night, he decided to prove to himself that it was all just some weird software issue. That he was, as most of Reddit would later say, spooking himself. At 2:10 a.m., he left the safety of the desk and walked down to the second-floor hallway that led to the smoking area door. The building hummed around him. Air conditioning, distant elevator cables, the faint buzz of the vending machine lights. He stood where the camera couldn't see him yet, just around the corner. He could see the outlines of the door's metal frame, the red exit sign glowing softly above it. His watch ticked over to 2:12. The overhead lights flickered, just like they had in the lobby. He heard footsteps. Soft, unhurried, rubber soles on old linoleum. They came from the far end of the hallway where the billing office doors were. The air suddenly smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and cheap floral perfume. He held his breath and stepped fully into the hall, heart pounding. The hallway was empty. The door to the smoking area was closed. He walked slowly toward it, the smell of smoke getting stronger the closer he got, like someone had just exhaled there. The hairs rose on his arms. He reached out and touched the crash bar. It was warm. Up in the lobby, on camera 2, a gray cardigan moved down the hallway, stopped, and turned its head as if someone had just stepped in front of it. He didn't see that, of course. He was on the second floor, alone in that humming hallway, one hand on a door that should have been cold. The smell of cigarettes was now so strong it felt like someone had just blown smoke in his face. His eyes watered. Instinct kicked in. He let go of the bar and took 2 steps back. Behind him, all the way down the hall toward the billing offices, something clicked. Not a door. More like a brief static pop from an intercom that hadn't worked in years. He turned the fluorescent tubes, overhead buzzed, dimmed for half a second, then came back. The hallway remained empty. Doors closed. No movement. He looked back at the smoking area door. The crash bar had depressed on its own, just a fraction of an inch, like someone on the other side was leaning against it with their hip. He didn't wait to see it open. He ran. By the time he reached the lobby, he was panting hard enough that the janitor pushing a mop cart gave him a weird look. He mumbled something about checking a leak and threw himself into the chair at the security desk. Camera 2 showed the hallway he'd just left. Empty. He scrubbed back the feed 60 seconds. There he was, walking toward the door, then stopping, then turning around. Behind him, in the far end of the hall, a faint figure in gray stepped out of the wall. Not through a door, out of the wall. Like the resolution changed and she had always been there, and now the pixels caught up. She watched him, head tilted, just like she did when she laughed at her phone. When he turned back toward the door, her eyes went straight to the camera. To him. The moment his back disappeared around the corner, she took 1 step forward and faded, like smoke dragged away by a vent. He stopped patrolling alone after that. He started bringing a friend on slow nights, another student who'd sit at the desk with him and pretend to study. For a week, nothing happened. Maya's name stayed strangely active in the badge logs. 1 entrance swipe around 6 p.m., 1 exit swipe just after 2 in the morning, until HR finally called IT and insisted they fix whatever bug was causing it. The swipe stopped. Camera 2 went back to showing nothing but a crappy hallway and an ugly door. He quit at the end of the semester. He posted the story to Reddit 6 years later, on a throwaway half convinced the internet would diagnose him as sleep-deprived or attention-seeking. The comments called it fake. They said if it was real, he'd have proof. He answered one of them with a link. It wasn't a video. The building owned the footage, and he hadn't risked copying it. What he had kept, out of pure habit, were screenshots he used to attach to his nightly reports: door counts, access anomalies, badge errors. One of them was a log export from the week after Maya's death, saved as a PDF, printed and stuffed into a binder at the time. He'd scanned it for the Reddit post. The columns were boring: badge ID, name, door, time, result. The skeptic scrolled past the rows, pointed at something, and then wrote a second comment that's still there, edited only once. OP, I just realized something. Look at the timestamps. Look at the seconds column. Every one of her entrance swipes is at exactly 18 hours. Every one of her exit swipes is at exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes. Human hands don't swipe doors on the exact same second, every day, down to the digit. Software can. Schedules can. People can't. The top response under that wasn't an accusation. It was someone who said they'd worked in physical security. If HR deletes a badge before the system clears scheduled events, the software sometimes behaves like that. It keeps trying to execute a user's access routine until it times out. Except there's no such thing as a pre-scheduled badge routine in that vendor's software. There's only live use. If those logs are real, the system didn't think Maya was a glitch. It thought she was still showing up to work. The second story didn't come with screenshots. It didn't need them. The final detail was something anyone could look up. This one was posted to our /true off my chest by a user who called herself Room 4 Babov. No backstory, no previous posts, just a wall of text, dropped at 3 in the morning with the title, "I don't think my upstairs neighbor knows she's dead." She wrote that she'd moved into a cheap, old apartment building in a mid-sized city. The kind of place where the paint was always a little peeled, the stairwells always smelled like old dust and boiled vegetables, and your landlord only remembered your name when the rent was late. Her unit was on the 3rd floor. Directly above her, in 4B, there was supposedly an older woman who kept to herself. The landlord mentioned her once, in passing, when apologizing for taking a week to fix a leaky pipe. "She's quiet," he'd said. "Barely leaves the place. You won't even know she's there." For the first month, he was right. No noise from upstairs. No footsteps. No TV. No late-night arguments. Just the normal creaks and sighs of an old building. Then, one night around 2 a.m., she heard pacing. Not stomping. Not a party. Just slow, steady footsteps tracking from one end of the ceiling to the other. Back and forth. Back and forth. For hours. When the sound didn't stop by 4, she grabbed a broom and lightly thumped the ceiling. The pacing halted. 30 seconds later, someone did the exact same thump back, from directly above her head. She froze, then forced herself to laugh. Of course, the mysterious old lady upstairs would be annoyed at being told to be quiet. She muttered an apology she knew the woman couldn't hear and rolled over, pulling the blanket up. The next night, as she lay in bed, it started again. Pacing. The same path. The same rhythm. Heel toe. Heel toe. She watched the time on her phone tick from 2:03 to 3:47. Finally, exhausted and a little unnerved, she grabbed the broom again and tapped the ceiling. Silence. Then 3 distinct knocks came down from above. Not angry. Not random. Like someone responding to a door. This became a ritual. Every few nights, the pacing. Her ceiling tap. The answering pattern from above. She imagined the woman. Thin, white hair, walking to soothe her nerves or her joints. Maybe lonely. Maybe afraid to sleep. She thought about baking something and taking it up, but she never got around to it. She worked late. She was shy. Excuses were easier than introductions. 2 months into her lease, she came home to find the hallway on her floor full of police and men in plain clothes. Her BS door was open, yellow tape stretching across it. Her landlord stood by the stairwell, wringing his hands. "What happened?" she whispered. He jumped like he'd forgotten she even lived there. "Oh, just building stuff. You'll need to use the back stairs for a day or 2. She glanced into 4B as they ushered a gurney out. There was a black bag on it, the shape of a person beneath. She caught a glimpse of a floral housecoat sleeve before someone stepped between her and the stretcher. That night, the pacing started at exactly 2:01 a.m. She didn't tap the ceiling. That night, the pacing started again. Heel, toe, heel, toe, tracing that same invisible track across her ceiling. It was somehow worse now that she knew there had been a body upstairs, that the woman from 4B had been zipped into a bag and rolled past her door. She lay there, staring at the hairline crack that ran across the plaster above her bed, following the steps with her eyes. Back and forth, back and forth. Every few passes they would pause directly over her, then resume, a little quicker, like the walker was getting impatient. Her phone screen glowed on the nightstand. 2:08 a.m. She told herself it was old pipes. Old buildings always made noises. Maybe the paramedics had knocked something loose moving the gurney. Maybe the landlord was up there already, patching the place so he could rent it again. At 2 in the morning, 3 soft knocks came down from the ceiling above her head. They were so gentle that, for a second, she wondered if she'd imagined them. Then they came again. 3 crisp, evenly spaced taps, like knuckles on wood. She didn't raise the broom. She didn't answer. Instead, she slipped out of bed, grabbed her keys, and left the apartment without shoes. She slept in her car in the parking lot with the engine off and the doors locked, shivering under an old hoodie until the sky started to lighten. In the morning, she cornered the landlord. He looked even worse than usual, rumpled shirt, deep shadows under his eyes. She blurted the question out before he could fake a smile. The woman in 4B. When did she die? He flinched. That's not something you need to worry about. I hear her, she said, voice shaking. At night. Walking. Knocking back when I knock. So either you're lying to me about finding her yesterday, or something is very wrong upstairs. He stared at her for a long time, then sighed, shoulders sagging in defeat. They think she'd been gone almost 3 weeks, he murmured. No one saw her. No one up here talks to anyone. A delivery guy finally called the cops about the smell. Later, after she posted her story, people in the comments called her dramatic, accused her of making it all up for karma. She replied once more, with a link to a small local news article. It was a simple piece. Reclusive woman found dead in apartment. It mentioned the building, the floor, and the fact that her estimated time of death was approximately 3 weeks before discovery. Her Reddit account never replied again. The third story came from a user who deleted his profile less than an hour after posting. The mods had to restore his thread from an archive because it kept disappearing in waves of mass reports, like someone was trying very hard to scrub it. He said he worked IT for a county office and was helping digitize old case files. Most of it was boring, property disputes, licensing issues, scanned forms from the 80s. One afternoon, he opened a directory labeled MISC, audio, and found a single file with no description, just a date from 15 years earlier and a case number he didn't recognize. It was a 911 call. He expected the usual: domestic dispute, car crash, somebody screaming about an intruder. Instead, he heard a small boy, maybe 5 years old, carefully give his address and tell the operator that his mommy was sleeping on the kitchen floor and wouldn't wake up. The operator kept him talking while dispatch sent help. She asked his name. He said it. She asked if the door was locked. He said no. The tall man had left it open when he went back out the window. She asked what tall man. The boy paused, then said, very clearly, the one who lives in the hallway. The Redditor got curious. He plugged the case number into the county database. No homicide record. The incident had been categorized as a medical emergency, heart failure. No mention of an intruder. No mention of a child describing someone who lived in the hallway. The last line of his post was the part that made even cynical commenters stop joking. I googled the address out of habit, he wrote. Zillow has interior photos from when the place was flipped last year. There is no hallway in that house. It's an open-plan ranch. It was built that way in 1972 and has never been remodeled.